Wolf Prince Jareth Morven signed away Rosamund Fenlow's home while rain fell through the roof she had spent 15 years repairing. The transfer ceremony took place in Grey Hearth Manor's Great Hall, beneath rafters darkened by war smoke and winters without enough coal. Royal witnesses stood on flagstones Rosamund had paid to reset, after enemy soldiers broke them for firewood. Lady Regent Sabrine Morven waited beside the long table with a new ring of iron keys already hanging from her belt. Rosamund still carried the old keys at her waist. There were 31 of them. She knew which cellar lock swelled in wet weather, which nursery door required lifting before it would turn, which grain room key had been recut from a cavalry buckle during the siege. None of that knowledge appeared in the transfer decree. The decree called her temporary occupant. Jareth's seal cooled beneath his hand. Grey Hearth Manor reverts to the royal line. The herald read, "For want of a lawful male steward descended from Lord Edric Fenlow. Rosamund's husband had been dead 11 months. He had left no son. According to the revised inheritance law, he had therefore left no one capable of owning what remained." Sabrine looked across the table at Rosamund. She was a handsome woman in silver-black mourning wool, though she had mourned no one in years. Her authority rested in the stillness of her hands and the certainty that others would eventually mistake patience for fairness. "You may remain until the end of the week," she said. "The crown is not without compassion." Rosamund glanced toward the western wall, where rainwater collected in a copper basin. "I replaced that section of roof 3 times during the war. Maintenance does not create inheritance. I paid the manor's debts. Payment does not alter blood. I kept 43 people fed when the royal supply road failed. Service is honorable," Sabrine said. "It is not ownership." The witnesses remained silent, because every sentence sounded lawful when spoken slowly enough. Jareth stood at the head of the table in a dark wolf fur mantle, broad-shouldered and severe, with rain still silvering his black hair. 10 years earlier, before duty arranged Rosamund's marriage to Edric Fenlow, Jareth had once asked her to leave the summer court with him. She had wanted to. Then her father's debts were called. Edric offered protection to her household, and Jareth was sent north to command royal wolves. Neither of them had spoken honestly since. Now he had returned to take the house she had built inside another man's name. Rosamund looked at him. "Did you read the wartime ledgers?" His jaw tightened. "I read the inheritance finding." He had read the law that named her temporary, and skipped the winters that proved otherwise. "That was not my question." Sabrine intervened. "The prince is not required to audit household labor before enforcing crown law." "No," Rosamund said. "Only to benefit from it." One of the younger witnesses lowered his gaze. Jareth's golden gray eyes remained on her. "The law recognizes Edric's male issue." "There is none. The law recognizes what your family taught it to see." A warning moved through the room, subtle as a wolf raising its head. Sabrine rested 2 fingers on the transfer deed. "Take care, Lady Fenlow. I have taken care of this manor since I was 19. You entered it through marriage, and Grey Hearth survived through me." The words were not loud. They did not need to be. Behind Rosamund, the great fireplace held no flame. The crown's assessors had ordered every hearth extinguished before transfer, so no household spirit could be claimed as active tenancy. Above the cold grate crouched 2 stone wolves. They had guarded Grey Hearth longer than any written genealogy. One faced east, its carved muzzle worn smooth by generations of smoke. The other faced west. One paw cracked from the winter, a cannon strike split the chimney. Children called them the Hearth Wolves. Adults called them decoration. Rosamund's husband had called them witnesses when fever made him careless. 3 weeks before his death, Edric had stood beneath them and said, "There are things in this house my family was ordered not to remember." She had thought grief was troubling him. Then he began searching the walls at night. Then he died at the bottom of the sealed north stair, though Sabrine's physician declared the fall accidental. Jareth lifted the iron keyring from the table. "Rosamund, surrender the household keys." For the first time, his voice carried something beneath command. Regret, perhaps. But regret was not resistance. She unfastened the ring from her belt and placed it on the table between them. The weight of 31 keys struck the wood like a small chain. Jareth looked down at them. "You will be granted a widow's residence near the southern chapel. I do not need another room selected for me. It would be yours for life." "A room is not a life." Sabrine's patience thinned. This performance cannot change the decree. Rosamund turned toward the fireplace. No? But perhaps the house can. A sound came from the stone above the grate. Not a crack. A breath. Ash slid from the eastern wolf's mouth. One royal witness stepped backward. The western wolf lowered its carved head. Stone claws pressed into the mantle and left deep white marks. The creatures pulled themselves free, one limb at a time, shedding a century of soot across the floor. Jareth reached for the sword at his hip. His royal wolf moved beneath his skin, not toward attack but recognition. Sabrine's face lost color. "Extinguish them," she ordered. "There is no fire," Rosamund said. The Hearth Wolves landed on the flagstones. They did not wake for blood. They woke for the hand that had kept the hearth from going cold. Neither approached the prince. Neither bowed to the regent. They crossed the hall to Rosamund and lowered their massive stone heads beside her hands. Rosamund did not need the wolves to love her. She needed the manor to remember who had kept it alive. Both wolves turned toward the north wall. The cracked one drove its shoulder into a section of black paneling. The other caught an iron ring hidden beneath the carved wood. Together they pulled. The house had not contradicted the law. It had opened the part of itself the law had never inspected. A sealed door appeared inside the manor Jareth had just taken from her. Cold air moved from the darkness beyond it, carrying dust, old parchment, and the faint scent of Edric Fenlow's cedar shaving soap. Something rolled across the threshold and stopped against Rosamund's shoe. A man's ring had rolled from a wall his widow had been told she never owned. Edrich's signet ring. The ring had not returned from the dead. It had returned from the part of the house Sabrine had sealed before anyone asked why Edric fell. Rosamund bent and picked it up. Cedar oil darkened the grooves around the Fenlow crest. One edge was flattened from the siege, when Edric struck it against the grain room lock, and refused to let the smith repair it. He had worn that ring the night he died. Sabrine's gaze settled on the signet. It was reported missing after the burial. No, Rosamund said. It was missing when they brought him up from the north stair. The physician's men inventoried his effects. They inventoried what they chose to return. Jareth stepped away from the transfer table. He did not reach for Rosamund, or offer words that would make the witnesses admire his regret. Open the passage fully. Sabrine turned toward him. The north stair was sealed under a physician's ruling. Lord Fenlow's fall damaged the foundation, and the chamber was declared unsafe. Then the ruling can be examined. It bears the Regent's emergency authority. So did the transfer I signed today. Sabrine lowered her tone. A sealed death site cannot be disturbed because an old household mechanism moved. Rosamund closed her hand around Edric's ring. The wolves opened a witness passage. They did not explain what happened inside it. The Hearth Wolves remained beside the exposed doorway. Neither entered. Their stone bodies had returned to stillness, ash resting along their backs. They had opened what the active hearth remembered. The rest belonged to human evidence. Rosamund lit a ceremonial lamp. Jareth moved toward the threshold with her. His royal wolf rose beneath his skin, then stopped. A strain passed through his shoulders, as if the beast inside him had reached an invisible boundary and refused to cross. Rosamund noticed. Sabrine noticed her noticing. "The passage is unsafe," the regent said. Jareth's hand tightened near his sword. "My wolf has refused Grey Hearth's inner threshold since Edric's death." Rosamund looked at him. "And you signed the manor away without asking why?" He did not answer. Rosamund entered first. Dust lay thick on the central steps, but the edges had been disturbed. Someone had crossed the passage after Edric's fall and tried to brush away the evidence. She crouched near the first landing. "This ash is wrong," Sabrine said. "It is a chimney passage. Grey Hearth burns oak in the north flues. This is birch ash mixed with lime." Rosamund touched the pale line beside the wall. "Builders use it to test whether fresh mortar has shifted. Someone checked the seal after Edric died." She raised the lamp. The interior bolts were untouched. The outer hinges had been replaced. The passage was closed from the great hall after his body was removed. Jareth looked toward Sabrine. "Who ordered the work?" "The physician supervising the death site." "Name him." "He is dead." Sabrine's face cooled. "Grief does not make suspicion evidence." "No, repairs do." Rosamund moved downward. She knew Grey Hearth's construction better than the royal assessors who had declared her temporary. During the third winter of the war, she had paid 2 masons with grain to reinforce the north stair. They had left iron braces beneath every 6th step. The third brace had been cut, not broken by a fall. Cut. At the lower landing, the railing hung inward. A dark scrape crossed the stone where Edric had tried to stop himself. 4 parallel marks scarred the wall above it. Rosamund's breath tightened. But she did not let grief become the only language in the room. He did not simply lose his footing. Jareth descended 1 step despite his wolf's resistance. "What do you see?" The rail was loosened before he came down. He caught the wall after it gave way. Sabrine remained above them. "You are a household steward, not a death examiner. I ordered that rail repaired 6 years ago. I know where the old cracks ended." Beneath the broken brace lay a strip of silver-black wool. Edric's winter coat had been brown. Sabrine wore the same weave. Rosamund did not accuse her. Not yet. She folded the cloth into a clean handkerchief and handed it to the youngest witness. "Record where it was found." The passage ended in a narrow chamber behind the chimney mass. Shelves lined the walls, most of them emptied. Wax marks showed where document boxes had once stood. Edric's cedar scent lingered because his shaving pouch lay split beside a stone desk. Near it sat a leather ledger bag trapped beneath fallen plaster. Rosamund recognized the stitching. She had repaired it herself during the siege. Inside were wartime accounts, roof payments, grain debts, names of tenants she had sheltered, and receipts carrying her signature. Jareth looked over her shoulder. These should have been included in the estate audit. They were removed before the audit. Sabrine entered the chamber. "Household ledgers do not alter succession." "No," Rosamund said. "But they prove someone hid the years you said did not count." The bag held one final object. A folded sheet of wolfskin parchment, older than the manor's present crest. Edric had wrapped it in oilcloth and pressed his signet into the inner fold. Rosamund broke the brittle wax. The first lines described the ancient law of Grey Hearth stewardship. Not inheritance by eldest son. Not possession through marriage. Stewardship passed to the person who maintained the hearth, paid the house debts, protected its dependents, and kept the manor habitable through war or famine. At the bottom, Edric had begun a witness declaration 3 nights before his death. The writing shook near the final line. "I, Edric Fenlow, name the lawful keeper of Grey Hearth Manor." Beneath it, in his hand, stood one name: Rosamund Fenlow. The deed had not restored the manor. It had named the law Sabrine had buried. The old hearth deed had named Rosamund, but Sabrine still had the newer law. She accepted the wolfskin parchment from Jareth without touching the place where Edric had written Rosamund's name. "The Grey Hearth custom was superseded 22 years ago," she said. "The revised royal inheritance statute governs all estates attached to the crown." Rosamund kept the wartime ledgers against her chest. Custom is not the word written there. Sabrine's eyes cooled. Ancient households gave ceremonial titles to favored servants. It names stewardship. It does not grant ownership. It grants lawful possession to the person who keeps the manor solvent, habitable, and responsible for its dependents. Under a dead household rule. Rosamund looked toward the great hall beyond the passage. The Hearth Wolves remained motionless beside the opened panel. They offered no second miracle, no growl, no judgment. That suited her. A house does not survive war by bloodline. It survives by hands. Jareth unfolded the deed beneath the ceremonial lamp. Was Edric's declaration witnessed? Sabrine answered before Rosamund could. No. Rosamund opened the first ledger. His countersignatures witnessed the stewardship before he wrote the declaration. A signature on household expenses is not a succession oath. The old law does not require an oath at death. It requires an active record of stewardship before transfer. Jareth read the deed more carefully. Sabrine's voice remained measured. The final line is incomplete. Lord Edric's health was failing. The royal physician recorded periods of confusion, fever, and grief-induced fixation. He was well enough to inspect the north stair, Rosamund said. He was obsessed with walls and obsolete papers. He found the law your office removed from the estate audit. Sabrine turned toward the witnesses. You are hearing a widow reinterpret her husband's decline as conspiracy. Rosamund placed the ledger on the stone desk. No. You are hearing the household accounts. She opened to the first winter of the war. The manor roof had lost half its eastern slate after enemy fire struck the ridge. Edric had been away with the border levies. Rosamund borrowed against her mother's silver, paid 2 masons, and signed the repair order herself. Edric countersigned it when he returned. The next volume recorded grain purchased after the royal supply route failed. 43 servants, tenants, widows, and children remained fed through a winter when nearby estates emptied their villages to preserve noble stores. Rosamund's name appeared beside every payment. Edric's countersign stood below hers. The third ledger listed unpaid crown taxes inherited from Edric's father. Rosamund sold 2 pleasure horses, dismissed no servants, and cleared the arrears over 4 years. The fourth recorded the manor hospital she opened in the South Gallery during the winter fever. The fifth listed every family sheltered behind Grey Hearth's walls during the siege. Jareth turned the pages slowly. These entries satisfy every condition named in the hearth deed, Sabrin replied. They prove service. They prove stewardship, Rosamund said. Household labor does not become inheritance because it was difficult. The old law was written precisely because difficult labor kept estates alive when blood heirs did not. Jareth looked at the royal audit attached to the transfer finding. The crown document listed Edric as sole manager of Grey Hearth until his death. Rosamund appeared once. Widow in temporary residence. He compared the audit with the ledgers. The repair payments were removed. Sabrin said nothing. The debt clearances were removed. The grain purchases. The tenant protections. Every account carrying Rosamund's signature. The audit concerned title, not domestic administration. The title depended on whether active stewardship existed. The revised statute depends on male descent. Jareth looked at her. Then why remove records that supposedly had no legal value? For the first time, Sabrin paused before answering. To prevent irrelevant material from delaying lawful reversion. Rosamund understood the argument because she had heard versions of it throughout her life. Women's work was irrelevant until it failed. Then its absence became evidence of their inadequacy. A woman can be erased from inheritance only if the ledgers that name her are sealed first. The youngest witness wrote the sentence into the hearing record. Sabrin noticed. You will strike that commentary. The witness looked toward Jareth. He did not order it removed. That was not yet justice. It was only the first moment in which his authority stopped assisting the erasure. Rosamund turned to the final wartime ledger. A royal archive slip had been stitched into its back cover. The slip recorded the removal of all stewardship materials from Grey Hearth's transfer review. It bore the seal of the Regent's property office. Jareth held it near the lamp. When was this order issued? During preparation for reversion, Sabrin said. The date contradicted her. The ledgers had been marked for removal 5 months before Edric died. Before there was a widow's claim to dismiss. Before Grey Hearth lacked a male steward. Jareth's royal wolf moved restlessly beneath his skin. Not in fear this time. In recognition of a trail he should have followed before signing. You prepared the transfer before the estate became eligible for reversion. Sabrin's expression did not break. I prepared for a foreseeable legal event. Edric had no son. His health was declining. The crown was required to protect a strategic manor. From Rosamund? From uncertainty. Rosamund closed the ledger. Grey Hearth was not uncertain while I managed it. Sabrin looked directly at her. You preserved one house. I preserved a kingdom's inheritance structure. There it was. Not greed spoken crudely. Fear given legal language. If Grey Hearth's old stewardship law remained valid, widows, daughters, unmarried sisters, and female estate managers across the Wolf Kingdom could reopen claims built on years of unpaid labor. Crown lands transferred through male descent might face challenge. Noble alliances could fracture. Sabrin had not buried one woman's deed merely to take one manor. She had buried a precedent. Jareth set the audit beside the old hearth law. Who drafted the revised inheritance statute? Sabrin's mouth tightened. It was approved by the Royal Council. That was not my question. Rosamund examined the archive slip again. A second date had been pressed beneath the removal order, nearly hidden under the Regent's wax. The revised statute had not been 22 years old when it first touched Grey Hearth. A private amendment had been added only months ago. Jareth broke the outer seal. The amendment stripped active stewardship from childless widows and forced immediate crown reversion upon a husband's death. It had been drafted 3 months before Edric fell down the north stair. The authorizing name appeared at the bottom. Lady Regent Sabrine Morven. Jareth had signed the transfer as if the law were neutral, and now the law stared back with Sabrine's name beneath it. The amendment had been written before Edric died, but it still did not explain who made his death arrive on time. Jareth laid the parchment beside the cut stair brace. Sabrine remained composed. Reforming inheritance law is not proof of murder. Grey Hearth controls the northern grain road, 3 winter crossings, and the shelter line between royal land and the border villages. The crown could not leave its future uncertain. Grey Hearth was not uncertain, Rosamund said. Edric was alive, and I was managing it. He had no son. He had a steward. He had a wife performing household duties. Rosamund looked at the broken railing. Law reform does not cut iron. Jareth turned to the youngest royal witness. Bring the physician's ruling on Edric Fenlow's death. Sabrine's gaze sharpened. The attending physician is dead. His ruling was sealed and entered as final. Final records can still contain dates. They can also contain private medical details. Edric's death transferred a strategic estate to the crown. It stopped being private when the crown profited from the ruling. The witness left for the archive chest in the Great Hall. Rosamund remained beside the lower landing. Her lamp showed the pale lime line along the wall and the fresh hinge bolts farther above. Someone had not merely closed the passage. Someone had measured whether the new work would hold. Jareth examined the cut brace. What tool made this? A narrow estate saw, Rosamund said. Not a weapon. Something a mason could carry without alarming the household. Could Edric have cut it himself? He ordered it installed. That is not an answer. No. She met his eyes. He could not have reached the inner edge without removing the step above it. The step was reset after the cut. Jareth looked toward the newly mortared seam. His authority had not created the erasure. It had completed it. The witness returned with a narrow black case bearing the royal physician's seal. Sabrine placed one hand over the lock. The document may be opened only by a ruling prince or the regent. Jareth held out his hand. Then move yours. For one moment neither did. Sabrine withdrew first. The ruling consisted of 4 pages. The first described Edric's injuries. The second declared the fall accidental. The third ordered the North Passage sealed because of structural danger. The fourth authorized removal of all objects considered medically disturbing to the widow. Rosamund read the final line twice. Medically disturbing. Sabrine said, "You were newly bereaved." So they removed his ring, his papers, and the deed he died trying to carry. The physician acted to protect you. Protection is a useful word when someone wants the protected person excluded from the room. Jareth compared the dates. The physician recorded beginning his examination at the 7th evening bell. The sealing order bore the 6th. He looked up. The passage was ordered closed before the body examination began. Sabrine replied without hesitation. Emergency structural work may precede formal documentation. Then why does the ruling claim the physician discovered the danger during examination? The clerk may have entered the bells incorrectly. Rosamund took the page. No. She pointed to a gray thumb mark beside the sealing order. This is wet lime. Jareth looked toward the pale line on the stair wall. The same mixture? Birch ash, lime, and ground shell. Grey Hearth never used it. Royal property masons do. Sabrine's expression remained controlled. Many crown estates use the same mortar. Then there will be a work order. The regent did not answer. Jareth sent 2 guards to the property records stored with the transfer documents. They returned carrying a roll of expense slips tied with black cord. Rosamund opened them on the stone desk. One order supplied replacement hinges. One paid 4 royal masons for emergency night work. A third authorized removal of boxes, loose parchment, and personal effects from the north chamber before the widow could enter. The laborers belonged to the regent's property office. The request bore no physician's signature. It carried Sabrine's administrative seal. You prepared the stair to disappear, Rosamund said. I ordered a dangerous site secured. Before the physician examined it. Because the house contained unstable masonry and an unstable widow. Rosamund's fingers tightened on the work order. But her voice stayed level. You used my grief as a lock. The youngest witness recorded that too. Sabrine looked at Jareth. Be careful what precedent you create. If every emergency order is reopened because a bereaved household questions it, the Crown will lose the ability to act during crisis. Jareth's eyes remained on the dates. A statute drafted before a death is not inheritance law. It is preparation. It was preparation for a foreseeable transfer. And the work order? Preparation for a foreseeable collapse. Rosamund set the silver-black wool strip beside the property office records. The cloth was not enough to name a person. Regent officers, clerks, and senior attendants wore the same winter weave. But one expense slip listed replacement cloaks issued to the night crew after mortar and soot damaged their clothing. 4 masons. 1 supervising officer. Silver-black wool. Jareth read the officer's name. Master Holanve. Rosamund knew it. He inspected Grey Hearth before Edric died. Sabrine said. He inspected crown roads, mills, and structures throughout the northern estates. He asked where Edric kept the old house papers. That proves only that he performed an audit. He returned the week Edric fell. Jareth looked toward the passage entrance. Where is Holanve now? Retired. To where? Sabrine's answer came too carefully. The eastern coast. Jareth handed the name to a guard. Find whether he ever arrived. The regent's mouth hardened. Rosamund examined the remaining slips. One had been folded into the others, without an expense total. It was not a work order, but a copy of a message entered through the royal courier office. Edric Fenlow had requested a private audience with Wolf Prince Jareth Morven. The request named Grey Hearth's true keeper, an altered inheritance law, and documents removed from the royal archive. Jareth stared at the date. He had been at the northern garrison that week. His office had reported no message from Edric. Who received this? The courier entry carried the regent's forwarding mark. Sabrine said, Requests involving estate law passed through my office. Did you send it to me? The border command was unstable. I judged the matter could wait. Rosamund looked at the final line. Audience requested before midnight. Urgent risk to witness and record. Edric had sent it the morning of his death. By evening, the stair brace had been cut. Before night ended, the passage had been sealed, and the message asking Jareth to hear him had never left Sabrine's hand. By dawn, Edric's unanswered message had become more dangerous to Sabrine than the deed he died trying to protect. The regent ordered the north passage cleared. Every document will be transferred to the royal archive, she said. Lady Fenlow will be removed from Grey Hearth until questions of forgery, mental distress, and unlawful possession are resolved. Rosamund stood beside the stone desk with Edric's wartime ledgers under one hand. You sealed these records once. I secured an unstable estate. You removed the evidence before the law could inspect it. I will not allow a private household to conduct its own murder hearing. No, Rosamund said. You prefer hearings after your office has chosen what survives. The youngest witness continued writing. Sabrine turned on him. Close the record. He hesitated. Jareth said, Keep it open. The regent faced her nephew. You are permitting a grieving widow to accuse the crown in a room she has no right to occupy. Rosamund looked at the soot-dark stones around them. The law called me temporary because someone removed the years that made me permanent. Sabrine's patience hardened into rank. Under the Widow Protection Clause, Lady Fenlow may be placed in supervised residence when grief threatens estate order. That clause was written for widows being dispossessed by creditors, Rosamund said. Not for regents wishing to remove them from evidence. You are not licensed to interpret royal statute. I spent 15 years reading every levy, debt order, grain obligation, and tenant bond attached to this house. I learned the law because no one else came when it threatened the people living here. Sabrine signaled the royal guards. 2 men stepped toward Rosamund. The Hearth Wolves did not move. They had opened the hidden passage because the active hearth had been denied its keeper. They would not settle a dispute that human courage and evidence could still decide. Rosamund gathered the deed, ledgers, work orders, and physician ruling into Edric's leather bag. If you take these to the regent's archive, they disappear again. They become crown property. They describe the crown's conduct. That is precisely why they cannot remain solely in crown custody. Jareth moved between her and the guards. No document leaves Grey Hearth until duplicate witness copies are made. Sabrine studied him. You cannot suspend a royal transfer on sentiment. I am suspending it on concealed records, altered audits, a cut stair brace, and a death site sealed before examination. You have no judgment authority inside a reverted estate until the transfer is formally seated. Jareth looked toward the great hall. The transfer deed still lay on the long table beneath his cooling seal. He had signed possession to the Regent, but the ceremonial seating had not been completed. The new owner had not yet crossed the inner threshold carrying the crown keys, lit the first fire, and received the household's formal submission. Grey Hearth remained caught between legal states. Sabrine understood the opening at the same moment he did. She took the new iron key ring from her belt. Then we will complete the seating now. Rosamund followed them into the great hall. Servants and tenants had gathered along the walls. Some had served Grey Hearth since before Rosamund's marriage. Others had been children during the siege and remembered her dividing the last flour by household need rather than rank. Sabrine approached the cold fireplace. To complete royal reversion, the crown's representative will cross the inner hearth line, light the manor fire, and assume responsibility for its dependents. Rosamund looked at the copper basin catching rain beneath the western leak. You have not repaired the roof. The crown will commission repairs. You do not know which grain room is dry. An estate steward will be appointed. You dismissed the woman who already knew. Sabrine turned to the witnesses. Record her obstruction. Jareth took the key ring from Sabrine. I signed the transfer. I will test whether it can be lawfully seated. Rosamund's gaze met his. Testing the transfer was not returning her home. It was the first time he had required the law to prove itself after using it against her. He walked toward the broad line of pale stone surrounding the fireplace. Old manor custom called it the hearth boundary. Guests could cross freely. Claimants entered only by right or invitation. The moment Jareth's boot touched the line, his royal wolf struck against his skin. He stopped. The change was visible in his hands first. Dark claws pressed beneath his fingernails. Silver fur rose briefly along his wrists. His golden gray eyes sharpened, but the beast did not emerge. It pulled backward, not from the Hearth Wolves. From the threshold itself, Sabrine said. Control your animal. Jareth tried again. His wolf locked his knees. A growl moved through him, low and unwilling. Rosamund opened the ancient hearth deed. There is writing beneath the stewardship clause. Smoke and handling had darkened the lower lines. She carried the parchment toward the empty grate and held it near the faint warmth still trapped in the stones. Older ink appeared. The crown guest oath. Grey Hearth had once sheltered Morven kings during winter wars. In return, the royal family swore never to claim the manor from its active keeper. A royal wolf could enter as ruler, guest, or defender, but never as an owner who had displaced the person maintaining the hearth. Jareth read the oath. Sabrine's face remained composed, but one hand tightened around the edge of her sleeve. That language has no standing under modern crown law. Your wolf disagrees, Rosamund said. A beast's instinct is not a legal ruling, no. But it is the reason your family erased this oath. Jareth looked toward Sabrine. You knew my wolf would not cross. I knew Grey Hearth carried obsolete warding. You told me its resistance came from Edric's death. It began after his death, because his death activated the transfer you prepared. Sabrine lowered her voice. If this oath is admitted, every crown claim against a stewarded estate may be challenged. The northern houses will stop paying reversion levies. Widows will reopen settled transfers. Daughters will contest their brothers. The kingdom will spend a generation in property war. Rosamund stepped to the hearth boundary. Grey Hearth was not the prize. The precedent was. Sabrine did not fear one widow. She feared what one widow could prove. Jareth looked at the royal keys in his hand. He could not complete the transfer while his wolf rejected the claim. He could not return the manor without a formal court ruling, and he could not pretend the law remained neutral after finding his family's buried oath beneath it. Rosamund held out her hand. Those are not your keys yet. He placed the iron ring on the long table rather than giving it to her. Not restoration. Suspension. The seating is halted, he said. Grey Hearth remains under witnessed custody until the old oath, Edric's death, and the altered audit are heard before the wolf court. Sabrine's eyes hardened. You have no neutral custodian. Rosamund lifted her 31 old keys from where she had surrendered them. I have kept the house through war, debt, famine, and burial. Jareth looked at her. Will you hold it until the hearing? I will keep Grey Hearth alive, she said. That is not the same as holding it for you. She crossed the hearth boundary without resistance. The stone wolves remained still. But deep inside the cold fireplace, one buried ember opened its red eye. The old oath had recognized its keeper. The wolf court would now have to decide whether the crown was willing to do the same. The ember beneath Grey Hearth had not restored Rosamund's title. It had summoned the court that could still take the manor from her. 3 days later, the wolf court gathered inside the great hall, because the Hearth Wolves would not permit the transfer hearing to be moved to the capital. The stone creatures remained above the cold grate, silent once more, while judges, pack lords, and property witnesses filled the benches Rosamund had repaired after the siege. Lady Regent Sabrine stood beneath the royal banners. Rosamund stood beneath the leaking roof. No one mentioned the difference. Jareth sat beside the judges without a crown, his authority limited because his own signature appeared on the disputed transfer. He could question witnesses, but he could not issue the final ruling. Sabrine had requested that restriction herself. The prince's judgment is compromised, she said. He shares a documented personal history with the claimant. The court turned toward Rosamund. There it was, not evidence against her stewardship. A woman's former love offered as proof that her legal claim could not be clean. Rosamund kept both hands on Edric's ledger bag. Sabrine continued. Before Lady Fenlow married, Prince Jareth intended to court her. The private affection between them creates an obvious motive to manufacture a path by which Grey Hearth may remain near the royal line. Jareth's face hardened. The hearth deed predates both of us. The declaration naming Rosamund does not. Rosamund spoke before he could defend her. My claim does not improve because Jareth once loved me. The word moved through the hall. Loved. Past tense. Spoken without cruelty and without invitation. Sabrine inclined her head. Yet marriage would resolve the dispute neatly. Rosamund looked at her. So, that is your solution. A lawful union between the prince and the widow would merge the crown claim with the Fenlow interest. Grey Hearth would remain protected. Rosamund would retain residence and rank. The court would avoid reopening every settled inheritance in the kingdom. The judges murmured. It was elegant. It gave Rosamund a home while denying that she had ever owned it herself. Jareth rose. I did not authorize that proposal. No, Sabrine said. You merely created the circumstances in which it became useful. His eyes moved toward Rosamund. For one dangerous moment, the room remembered that they had once wanted each other. Rosamund remembered too. A summer road. Jareth's hand around hers. The promise of a life neither of them had been powerful enough to choose. But longing was not law, and old tenderness could become another form of confiscation if she allowed it to stand where her own right should have been. I will not marry to make my labor legible, she said. One judge leaned forward. Lady Fenlow, the proposal would secure your position. My position was secure before someone rewrote the law. It would prevent further scandal. It would prevent the court from admitting that a widow may own what she kept alive. Sabrine's voice remained calm. You reject protection because pride is more valuable to you than Grey Hearth. No. I reject a second transfer disguised as romance. Jareth took the words without flinching. Rosamund faced him directly. You cannot turn love we once had into a new kind of deed. The hall became still. He did not say he still loved her. He did not ask her to reconsider. He lowered his gaze once, then looked toward the judges. Record her refusal as a legal objection, not emotional distress. Sabrine's mouth tightened. The hearing moved to the hearth deed. Her advocates argued that the old stewardship law had been ceremonial, repealed by the male inheritance statute, and activated only when a manor faced abandonment. Rosamund opened the wartime accounts. Grey Hearth faced abandonment when royal grain failed, soldiers stripped the roof, and creditors demanded foreclosure. The active steward prevented all three. The court reviewed the receipts. Every debt carried her signature. Every repair bore Edric's countersign. Every protected tenant appeared in the winter rolls. Sabrine's advocate said, These acts prove competence. They do not prove title. Rosamund placed the ancient deed beside the revised statute. The newer law erased the category that would have made these acts legally visible. A judge examined the Regent's amendment. It was enacted before Lord Edric's death. And before Grey Hearth qualified for reversion, Rosamund said. Sabrine answered. The Crown legislates for foreseeable risks. The law was followed by removed ledgers, a cut stair brace, a sealed death sight, and a message withheld from the prince, none of which proves I ordered Edric harmed. Rosamund did not claim more than the evidence held. No, it proves your office prepared to benefit from his death before anyone investigated how it happened. Jareth's hand tightened against the bench. The chief judge called for the physician ruling and the regent work orders. Dates were read aloud. The stair had been sealed before the body examination. Royal masons had removed boxes under Sabrine's authority. The courier request to Jareth had never been forwarded. Still, the judges hesitated. The crown had lived under Sabrine's administration through war. Many estates depended upon the law she had written. Declaring Grey Hearth's claim valid would not affect one widow alone. Sabrine knew their fear. If Rosamund wins, she said, thousands of women may reopen transfers settled for generations. Estates will divide. Brothers will face sisters. The crown will drown in claims. Rosamund looked across the benches. Then perhaps those transfers were never settled. Only silenced. Before the judges could answer, the great doors opened. A royal guard entered with an older man in travel-stained black. Master Holanve, the regent property officer Sabrine, had claimed retired to the eastern coast. He had never reached it. The guard placed a sealed confinement order on the table. Holland had spent 11 months inside a crown hunting lodge under another name. The order authorizing his silence bore Sabrine's private seal. Holland looked once at the broken stair brace displayed before the court, then at Rosamund. I cut the iron, he said. Sabrine did not turn toward him. Holland's voice shook, but the order did not say to kill Lord Edric. He looked at Jareth. It said only that Grey Hearth must have no lawful male steward by winter. The order had not named Edric's death. It had named the condition his death fulfilled. Grey Hearth must have no lawful male steward by winter. Holland Vey stood before the wolf court with his wrists bound in plain iron. 11 months of confinement had hollowed his face, but not the precision of a man trained to remember measurements. Sabrine finally turned toward him. You were dismissed for theft. I was confined because I kept the work copy. You cut a structural brace without authorization. I cut it under your property order. The order required preparation for crown inspection. It required Lord Edric to lose access to the North Chamber. Sabrine looked toward the judges. A frightened prisoner will read murder into any instruction that reduces his sentence. Holland's mouth tightened. I was promised no sentence. I was promised land on the eastern coast. And yet you possess none, because your men took me from the road. The chief judge lifted the regent order. It does not explicitly command a death. No, Rosamund said. It commands the result needed before her amendment could seize the manor. Sabrine answered calmly. It commands the removal of an invalid steward from a dangerous passage. Edric was not an invalid when the brace was cut. He was ill. He was searching. The distinction mattered. Illness could justify protection. Searching required someone to fear what he might find. Jareth remained beside the judicial bench, his expression controlled. Tell the court what happened after Edric stepped onto the stair. Holland looked at Rosamund before answering. I had loosened the rail and cut the third brace. I was told the passage would be inspected the next morning, after Lord Edric had been ordered away from Grey Hearth. He was never given such an order, Rosamund said. I know that now. What happened? He came after dusk carrying a lamp and a leather ledger bag. The rail gave when he reached the lower turn. Rosamund's fingers closed around Edric's signet inside her pocket. Did the fall kill him? No. The word changed the room. Sabrine's advocate rose. This witness is not a physician. I heard Lord Edric speak. Rosamund did not move. What did he say? He told me not to touch the bag. Then he asked who had changed the law. Sabrine's face remained still. Holland continued. He could not stand, but he pulled himself into the hidden chamber. He used the stone desk to write something. I sent one of the masons for the royal physician. The ruling says Edric died upon impact, Jareth said. The ruling was written later. Was he alive when the physician arrived? Yes. The court's silence deepened. Rosamund did not let grief become the only language in the room. What condition was he in? His breath was shallow. One leg would not hold. He was frightened. But he knew me, knew the room, and knew why he had gone there. Sabrine said, A dying man may speak clearly for moments and still lack legal capacity. Rosamund looked at her. You argued he died instantly when that protected the ruling. Now you argue he lived long enough to be confused because that protects the amendment. A judge lowered his eyes to the conflicting records. Jareth asked, "What did the physician do?" Holland swallowed. He examined Lord Edric. Then he asked whether the declaration had been witnessed. Rosamund looked toward the wolfskin deed. The physician knew about it. He read it. And he said an unwitnessed declaration could still delay reversion if the old stewardship law remained in the room. The youngest witness stopped writing for half a breath, then continued. Holland's voice grew quieter. The physician ordered the parchment, the ledgers, and Lord Edric's ring removed. Lord Edric struck his hand away. That was when the signet fell beneath the desk. Rosamund remembered the ring rolling from the sealed wall. Not magic. Not a message from the dead. An object missed during a hurried removal. What happened to Edric? She asked. Holland looked toward Sabrine. The physician gave him a sleeping draught. Sabrine's advocate objected. A standard pain measure. Holland shook his head. Lord Edric said the draught smelled wrong. Rosamund knew the household medicines. What did it smell like? Bitter willow and winter wolfsbane. A murmur moved through the court. Wolfsbane did not always kill wolf-blooded men. In small amounts it weakened, shifting, slowed healing, and made injury harder to survive. Sabrine spoke before accusation could settle. Wolfsbane is used to prevent involuntary transformation during severe trauma. Was Edric shifting? Jareth asked. No, Holland said. Was he violent? No. Then why was it given? The physician said the regent required the estate quiet before morning. Sabrine's face did not collapse. My office required the site secured. I did not prescribe medicine. The chief judge turned to Holland. Did you hear Lady Sabrine order the draft? No. Did you see her in the passage? No. The answer preserved her distance. Sabrine had built every order, so another hand completed the dangerous act. Rosamund understood the architecture of it now. A law drafted by the regent, ledgers removed by property clerks, a brace cut by a mason, a death declared by a physician, a transfer signed by a prince. No single document said murder. Together they created a widow with no legal standing. Sabrine looked toward the judges. You have a compromised laborer describing the independent decision of a dead physician. That is not proof that my office caused Lord Edric's death. No, Rosamund said. It proves your office prepared every benefit before his body was cold. Jareth's voice remained low. And my signature completed what you prepared. He did not ask Rosamund to absolve him because he had not known. Not knowing had been the privilege his rank allowed him. The court ordered the physician's payment accounts opened. Among the property expenses was a private disbursement made the morning after Edric died. It granted the physician's daughter a royal house near the southern wall and cancelled her family's debts. The payment bore Sabrine's emergency seal. Compensation for medical service, she said. Rosamund examined the attached receipt. The service description had been scraped away, but another line remained beneath the wax. Final certification delivered. Male stewardship extinguished. Reversion may proceed. Jareth read it aloud. The royal wolf beneath his skin answered with a growl that shook the bench. Sabrine turned toward him. Control yourself. No, he said. For once, I will listen to what my authority was trained not to hear. The Hearth Wolves remained motionless above the fireplace. Rosamund had not needed them to accuse anyone. The records were beginning to do what stone could not. The chief judge called for the final attachment to the physician's account. A narrow strip of parchment unfolded from beneath the receipt. It carried Edric's last dictated statement, entered by the physician before the sleeping draught was given. Grey Hearth has a lawful keeper. Rosamund Fenlow holds the hearth by labor, debt, and witness. Below the words appeared an empty space where the physician should have signed. Instead, another hand had written one instruction. Do not certify. The handwriting belonged to Lady Regent Sabrine Morven. Sabrine's handwriting did not confess to murder. It proved she had ordered the truth to remain uncertified. The strip of parchment lay beneath the court lamps. Do not certify. Sabrine did not deny the words. Edric's statement had no lawful witness. The physician heard it, Rosamund said. A physician records health, not inheritance. He recorded Edric clearly enough to write every word. He refused certification because Edric was dying. No, he left the witness line empty because you told him to. Jareth rose from beside the judges. You called Edric dead upon impact. Then confused. Then alive but incapable. Each version served the record you needed. I served the kingdom. You served a result. The chief judge examined the physician's account. Did you know Edric had named Rosamund as keeper? I knew he had become fixated upon an obsolete custom. And you ordered the physician not to certify it. I ordered him not to turn a dying man's obsession into crown law. Rosamund understood the design. Sabrine had not written a false statement. She had made sure the true one could not exist legally. The youngest witness read Edric's words aloud. Grey Hearth has a lawful keeper. Rosamund Fenlow holds the hearth by labor, debt, and witness. Servants and tenants along the walls straightened. The Hearth Wolves remained still above the grate. They had opened the wall. Rosamund and the records had opened the law. Sabrine saw it. One declaration cannot reopen the property structure of the kingdom. Then stop pretending this is only about one manor, Rosamund said. If stewardship becomes title, widows, daughters, sisters, and estate managers will reopen claims across the realm. Not labor alone. Recorded stewardship under binding house law. Those customs were removed to stop family wars. Her fear was not invented. Old inheritance conflicts had divided estates and armed cousins against one another. But peace had been purchased by deciding whose work disappeared. Rosamund lifted the old deed. Grey Hearth names one keeper by measurable duties. Debts paid, dependents protected, land kept productive, hearth maintained. And who judges that? The records. Records can be altered. So can statutes. Jareth looked toward the open north passage. Holland said document boxes once filled that chamber. Rosamund nodded. Sabrine said. They were moved to the royal property hall. The court clerk checked the transfer inventory. Only household ledgers were listed. No stewardship contracts. No guest oath. No ancient deeds. Rosamund looked toward the empty shelves. The boxes were removed without entering the archive. An elderly servant stepped forward. Mistress Rosamund, when the chimney was rebuilt, you ordered the masons to leave the lower ash channel open. Rosamund remembered. The narrow passage allowed soot to be cleared behind the fireplace. It did not appear on royal plans because no assessor had asked the women who maintained the house. Bring the oven hook. She knelt before the cold grate and pushed the iron rod into the channel. The first pull brought ash. The second caught wood. A blackened cedar case slid onto the stones. 7 names were carved into the lid. 5 belonged to women. Rosamund opened it. Inside lay stewardship contracts spanning nearly 2 centuries. A widow who preserved Grey Hearth through plague. A daughter who paid its war debts. An unmarried aunt who rebuilt the tenant village after fire. Each contract transferred the manor to the person whose recorded labor had kept it alive. The final contract carried Edric's signature beneath Rosamund's. He had not invented a right for his wife. He had restored a lawful succession practice the crown had buried. The chief judge leaned closer. These records require authentication. They will receive it, Rosamund said. Sabrine stepped before the bench. As regent, I invoke emergency suspension. All proceedings involving ancient estate customs will move to the capital. Jareth faced her. To the archive that already lost the records? To royal control. That is exactly why they cannot go, Rosamund said. Sabrine looked at Jareth. You will fracture the crown because guilt has made you careless. He looked at Rosamund. He did not ask her to mistake this choice for an apology. And she offered him no relief from what he had signed. He looked at the unused royal keys on the transfer table. Then he removed his wolf prince signet. I suspend my claim to Grey Hearth and every estate transferred under Sabrine's amendment until independent review is complete. The judges rose in alarm. Sabrine's voice lowered. You invite claims against your own house. I already used my house to complete an erasure. He placed the signet beside Rosamund's 31 keys. The court remains here. The contracts stay under shared witness custody. No royal archive will hold the only copy. Jareth had not restored Grey Hearth, but he had made his own inheritance answerable to the proof he once refused to read. By morning, Sabrine could no longer control the documents, so she tried to control the meaning of them. The wolf court reconvened around the cedar case. Independent scribes from 3 neighboring estates examined the contracts under lamplight. They tested the wolf skin, compared old inks, studied the hearth ash sealed into each fold, and matched the names against surviving tax rolls. The Hearth Wolves remained still above the grate. No miracle completed the work. Rosamund stood beside the records while human hands verified what the house had preserved. The eldest scribe lifted the first contract. Authenticated. Grey Hearth stewardship transferred to Mistress Rosamund Fenlow during the winter plague. A second followed. Authenticated. Stewardship transferred to Mara Fenlow after payment of Crown War debts. The third named an unmarried aunt who rebuilt the tenant village after fire. 5 women, 2 men. Each had held Grey Hearth because each had met the same measurable obligations Rosamund had fulfilled. Sabrine listened without visible alarm. When the final contract was opened, she addressed the court. Authentication proves age, not present authority. These customs were absorbed into Crown law generations ago. Rosamund looked toward the judges. Then why did her office remove every copy? To prevent obsolete claims from being mistaken for active title. You do not hide a dead law before a widow can invoke it unless you fear it is still alive. Sabrine turned toward the assembled pack lords. This is no longer a property hearing. It is an organized challenge to royal order. If Grey Hearth is granted exemption, every stewarded estate may refuse crown reversion. A northern lord nodded reluctantly. Another asked, how many houses carried similar contracts? The archive clerk opened a recovered index from the Regent's property office. 47 are named. The hall shifted. Sabrine had buried more than one precedent. Rosamund read the list. Some houses had passed to distant male cousins. Others had reverted to the crown after widows were removed. Several now funded Sabrine's regency through rents and levies. Grey Hearth was not the prize. The precedent was. Sabrine raised a sealed decree. As regent, I declare the recovered contracts a threat to crown stability. All related claims are suspended. Rosamund Fenlow is to be removed from Grey Hearth, pending inquiry into coordinated estate unrest. The royal guards moved. Jareth rose, but Rosamund spoke first. Read the charge. Sabrine's gaze narrowed. You have heard it. Lee. I heard fear. Read the legal act I committed. The regent held the decree without opening it. Rosamund continued. I paid debts, fed tenants, repaired crown roads, sheltered royal soldiers, preserved grain stores, produced contracts your office concealed. Which act is rebellion? You are encouraging other women to challenge settled title. I have sent no message to another estate. Your claim will become the message. That is not a crime. It is a consequence. The youngest witness recorded every word. Sabrine looked toward Jareth. If you obstruct this arrest, you act against the regency and invite formal review of your fitness to inherit. The court waited. Jareth had already suspended his property claims. This would place his position as Wolf Prince at risk. Rosamund did not ask him to save her. She turned to the judges. The crown guest oath forbids the royal family from claiming Grey Hearth against its active keeper. The authenticated contracts prove that oath remained part of the manor's title. The transfer was unlawful before Jareth signed it. The chief judge studied the parchment. The oath binds the royal claimant. It also binds royal officers acting in his name. Sabrine replied. The regent stands above household custom. No, Rosamund said. The regent stands inside crown authority. She cannot use a power the crown itself swore not to exercise. Jareth stepped down from the bench. His wolf moved beneath his skin, no longer resisting him. He stopped outside the hearth boundary. I will enter only if Grey Hearth's keeper permits it. Sabrine's expression tightened. The court looked to Rosamund. She understood what he was doing. He was not claiming ownership. He was placing royal authority beneath the oath his family had erased. You may enter as witness, she said. Not as owner. Jareth crossed the line. His wolf did not resist. The Hearth Wolves remained stone. The oath required no spectacle. Jareth faced the guards. No arrest will occur under a decree that cannot name a crime. Sabrine's voice sharpened. You choose one widow over the crown. No. I choose whether the crown remains bound by its own word. The chief judge called for a ruling. The transfer amendment Sabrine had written was declared improperly applied to estates carrying active stewardship contracts. Grey Hearth's transfer was voided. The Regent's emergency suspension failed because she had concealed material records before issuing it. Rosamund did not kneel when the judgment was read. She stood with Edric's ledgers, the old contracts, and the 31 keys she had carried through war. The chief judge addressed her. "Rosamund Fenlow, the court recognizes your active stewardship of Grey Hearth Manor, subject to final registration." Rosamund answered, "Record ownership, not temporary custody." The judges conferred. Then the clerk amended the line. "Lawful owner and steward, Rosamund Fenlow." Sabrine did not confess. She stood beneath the royal banners while officers removed the regent's seal from her hand pending trial for concealment, unlawful transfer, witness suppression, and interference in Edric Fenlow's death inquiry. Rosamund watched without triumph. No ruling could return Edric to the stair he had climbed alive. But the law would no longer use his death to erase her life. The clerk placed the royal keys beside her old ring. Rosamund took only her own. "The crown's keys do not belong here." Jareth looked at her across the hearth. Grey Hearth had been returned to the woman who kept it alive. Now the court had to decide whether the same law would remain trapped inside one manor or open every sealed door Sabrine had feared. The first petition arrived before Grey Hearth's registration ink had dried. It came from a widow in the Western Hills who had kept 3 farms solvent after plague took her husband and sons. The second came from 2 sisters whose brother had sold their mother's estate while they were feeding its tenants through famine. By sunset, 12 claims waited on Rosamund's long table. Sabrine had feared one widow, because one widow could prove the erasures were connected. The Wolf Court could no longer pretend Grey Hearth was an exception. The judges remained at the manor for another week. Each morning, women arrived carrying tax receipts, grain tallies, repair contracts, tenant rolls, and household keys worn smooth by years of use. Not every claim was valid. Some estates had no binding stewardship law. Some records were incomplete. Rosamund refused to turn justice into sentiment, merely because sentiment had once been used against her. "Work must be proved," she told the court. "So must debt, protection, and continuous responsibility. Stewardship is not a reward for suffering. It is a legal record of who carried the estate." The chief judge entered her standard into the new review decree. Ancient stewardship contracts would be examined by independent witnesses. No estate could revert to the crown until all records naming active managers had been reviewed. Widows and daughters could not be removed before their testimony was heard. Household labor alone did not create title, but recorded stewardship could no longer be erased because the steward was a woman. Jareth signed the decree as witness, not owner. His suspension from royal property claims remained in force, while investigators reviewed every transfer made under Sabrine's amendment. Several pack lords accused him of weakening the crown. Others warned that acknowledging concealed claims would cost House Morven land, rents, and alliances. He did not withdraw his signature. That mattered more to Rosamund than any apology he might have spoken beside a private fire. Sabrine's trial began in the capital without her regent's seal. She continued to deny ordering Edric's death. The evidence could not prove she had instructed the physician to give wolfsbane. It did prove that she altered the law, withheld Edric's message, concealed his declaration, paid the physician after certification, and confined Holland Vey. She was convicted of unlawful transfer, witness suppression, abuse of regency authority, and conspiracy to conceal evidence. The murder inquiry remained open. Rosamund accepted that justice sometimes arrived without the clean ending grief desired. Grey Hearth required more immediate work. The western roof still leaked. 2 grain sheds needed new hinges. Winter stores had to be counted. Rosamund hired back the servants Sabrine's assessors dismissed and appointed Mistress Annal keeper of household records, with authority no future owner could remove without a witnessed hearing. The cedar case remained in the Great Hall, not as a relic. As an archive, anyone with a lawful claim could request to inspect. The Hearth Wolves returned to their places above the fireplace. Their stone bodies carried fresh cracks from the night they opened the hidden passage. But they did not wake again. The hearth was active. Its keeper was no longer being dispossessed. On the first evening after the court departed, Jareth came to Grey Hearth without soldiers, witnesses, or royal keys. Rosamund found him outside the hearth boundary. "You may cross as a guest," she said. He remained where he was. "I did not come to claim hospitality." "What did you come to claim?" "Nothing." The answer surprised her more than a declaration would have. He removed a folded document from his coat and placed it on the table within her reach. It was a formal renunciation of any Morven reversion interest in Grey Hearth. The document also required future royal officers to recognize the manor's stewardship succession before accepting taxes or military service from it. "You signed this without asking me to marry you," Rosamund said. "I heard you the first time. Many men hear refusal as negotiation. I treated your life as a problem law could solve without your voice. I will not repeat that mistake with love." She studied him. 10 years earlier, she had loved the young prince who asked her to leave the summer court. That man had possessed hope, but little courage against duty. The man before her had gained power and used it carelessly. He had also begun learning that remorse without surrendered advantage was merely another form of comfort. "You took my house," she said. "Yes." "You ignored your wolf's warning." "Yes." "You read the finding and not the ledgers." "Yes." He did not explain that Sabrine had misled him. He did not offer ignorance as innocence. Rosamund touched the Morven renunciation. "What will you do now?" "Review every transfer carrying my seal. Return what can be lawfully returned. Compensate families where records were destroyed. Submit future property findings to independent stewardship review. And when your council calls you weak, I will ask what strength they are protecting." The fire shifted behind her. Jareth looked toward it but did not cross the pale stone line. Rosamund remembered Sabrine's proposed marriage, a neat union that would have allowed the court to restore her residence without admitting her right. She remembered Jareth's face when she told him love could not become another deed. "What we had before is gone," she said. "I know. I will not promise it can be rebuilt. I know that too. You may never be more than the prince who learned too late." His expression tightened, but he accepted the possibility. "Then I will still do the work." Rosamund looked at the man she had once loved and the ruler he was still choosing to become. Then she stepped away from the hearth boundary, not to invite him into her ownership, to leave him room to enter as himself. "You may stay for supper," she said. "The western roof leaks over the guest chair." A faint warmth touched his face. "I remember." "No," Rosamund said. "You remember visiting. I remember repairing it." He inclined his head. "Then show me where the bucket goes." Rosamund crossed the hall with her own keys at her waist. Behind them, the fire burned beneath the silent stone wolves. Grey Hearth belonged to the woman who had kept it alive, and any love permitted inside it would enter by invitation, never inheritance.